"Excuse me, sir, are you sure you belong here?" That was the first thing Jameson Blake heard as he stepped through the grand revolving doors of the Goldstone Regency, one of the most luxurious hotels in downtown Atlanta. Tall, confident, and impeccably dressed in a navy blue three-piece suit, Jameson looked like a man with purpose. He carried himself with the poise of a leader, his steps measured, eyes observant, and expression calm. But behind the polished marble front desk stood a young receptionist named Chloe, whose expression shifted the moment her eyes met his. Her polite smile faltered for a fraction of a second before she recomposed herself. Jameson noticed it, but said nothing. He strolled up to the counter, placing his leather briefcase down gently. "Good evening," he said, checking in under the name Jameson Blake. "Reservation for the presidential suite." Chloe didn't check the computer. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, her tone suddenly reserved. "Are you here to meet someone?" she asked. "This property is very exclusive." Jameson blinked. He smiled slightly, maintaining his composure. "Yes," he replied. "I'm quite familiar with how exclusive it is. That's why I chose it." She didn't smile back. Instead, she leaned in and lowered her voice a little, though her tone remained condescending. "Sir, this hotel generally caters to a certain clientele. Perhaps you meant to book at the Metro and down the street." The air in the lobby suddenly felt 10 degrees colder. Guests passing by glanced over, sensing the tension. Jameson took a moment before speaking again. "I believe you're making an assumption," he said, evenly. "My name is Jameson Blake. Please check the system." Chloe hesitated. Still, she didn't touch the keyboard. Instead, she folded her arms. "Sir," she said carefully, "we reserve the right to deny entry to anyone who may be confused about our standards." Jameson raised an eyebrow. For a moment, he simply stared at her, trying to decide whether this was ignorance or something far worse. Then, without a word, he pulled his phone from his pocket. He opened an app labeled Goldstone Admin, tapped a few buttons, and held the screen up. It displayed his full name, company ID, and title, Jameson Blake, Chief Executive Officer, Goldstone Hotels. Her face went white. Chloe stared at the phone screen in disbelief. Her mouth moved, but no words came out. Her face flushed red, and she instinctively stepped back, as though trying to retreat from the reality she had just created. The man standing in front of her, the one she had so confidently dismissed, was the CEO of the entire Goldstone Hotels empire. I didn't realize," she finally muttered, her voice barely above a whisper. Jameson didn't respond right away. He lowered his phone slowly, placed it back into his coat pocket, and turned his gaze back to her. He wasn't angry, at least not on the surface, but his calm was chilling. "You didn't ask for my ID. You didn't check the reservation system. You didn't even try to verify what I said," he said. "Instead, you made a judgment, a personal one." Chloe looked like she might cry. But Jameson wasn't there for apologies. He was there to make a point. If I were anyone else, just a regular guest, maybe someone celebrating an anniversary or treating their family to a night here, would they have gotten the same treatment? He asked. She didn't answer. Guests in the lobby began whispering, catching wind of what was happening. Some recognized Jameson. Others simply saw the unfolding scene and knew something had gone wrong. Just then, the hotel manager, Mr. Carter, appeared from a side hallway. He was an older man with graying hair and a professional demeanor, but the moment he saw Jameson, he turned pale. "Mr. Blake," he gasped, hurrying over. "We weren't expecting you until tomorrow." Jameson nodded slightly. "I decided to come early," he said. "Wanted to see how things were going without the usual notice." Mr. Carter glanced nervously at Chloe, who stood frozen behind the desk. "Is there a problem?" he asked. Jameson turned to face him. "Yes," he said plainly. "There's a very big problem, but I think it's best we speak in your office." The three of them walked toward the back of the lobby in silence. Guests watched as the CEO of Goldstone Hotels disappeared behind a frosted glass door with a nervous receptionist and a red-faced manager. Inside the office, Jameson remained calm. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't throw accusations. Instead, he asked one question. "What kind of training does your front desk staff receive regarding guest interaction and bias prevention?" Mr. Carter looked caught off guard. We have standard orientation procedures, he replied. Customer service, basic sensitivity training, conflict resolution. Jameson interrupted. Clearly, it's not enough. He looked at Chloe again. You assumed I didn't belong here because of how I look. Not because of anything I said or did. Just because I didn't fit what you thought a guest in the presidential suite should look like. Chloe nodded tearfully. You're right. I'm so sorry, Mr. Blake. Jameson sat back in his chair and folded his arms. This isn't just about me. This is about how many other people have come here and left feeling unseen. Or worse, unwelcome. The weight of his words settled in the room. Mr. Carter immediately agreed to implement advanced anti-bias and diversity training for all front desk staff. Chloe was placed on a 30-day probation with mandatory retraining and a performance review. Jameson didn't fire her, but he made it clear the culture had to change from the ground up. He stood, adjusted his jacket, and looked back one final time. Hospitality isn't about who walks through the door. It's about how they're treated once they do. And with that, he left the office, not just as a CEO, but as a leader demanding better. The silence in the hotel lobby was deafening. The receptionist stood frozen, her mouth slightly open, her confidence completely shattered. A moment ago, she thought she was in control of the situation, dismissing a man she assumed didn't belong. Now she stood face to face with the man who owned the entire building she worked in. Jameson Blake, still calm, turned his phone slightly so she could clearly see the screen. There, in bold blue letters, it read, CEO Dashboard, Jameson Blake, System Admin. Just underneath was the internal ID, hotel ownership credentials, and a system-wide access log. In other words, the boss of everyone in the building. Still stunned, she finally found her voice. Sir, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. Before she could finish her sentence, a door behind the lobby desk burst open. Mr. Blake, shouted the hotel manager, Mr. Carter, rushing out as if he'd just seen a ghost. Oh my, sir, we weren't expecting you until tomorrow morning. Jameson turned toward him with the same calm smile he'd held since walking in. Well, he said slowly, I decided to come early. Wanted to experience the guest experience unannounced. Mr. Carter glanced nervously between Jameson and the receptionist. He was pale, sweating, and panicked. He knew exactly what had just happened and how bad it looked, not just for the staff, for the entire brand. The receptionist was visibly panicking now. I didn't mean any disrespect. I thought maybe... Jameson raised a hand gently. He wasn't interested in excuses. I understand what you thought, he said firmly, and that's the problem. Then he turned back to Mr. Carter. I'd like to speak to you. In private. Now. The receptionist started to follow, hoping to plead her case. Jameson stopped and looked at her directly. You'll be joining us. This isn't something I want whispered about later. Inside the manager's office, Jameson took a seat. He didn't look angry. He looked disappointed. Let me ask you something, he began, folding his hands. If I were wearing jeans and a t-shirt, would you have said the same thing? If I were white, Asian, dressed differently? Mr. Carter sat quietly, unsure what to say. I've been in the hospitality industry for 20 years, Jameson continued. I started as a bellhop. I cleaned toilets. I parked cars. I worked every position in this business. I know how it feels to be overlooked. I built this company to make sure no one else would feel like that again. He turned to the receptionist, who was now tearing up. You judged me the second you saw me. Didn't check my name. Didn't ask for ID. You assumed, based on nothing more than my skin, that I didn't belong. She stammered out, I didn't mean it like that. Some people try to sneak in. I was just being cautious. Were you cautious with the man who walked in right before me? He asked. The one in the golf shirt and baseball cap who didn't even speak to you? Because I saw you hand him a key without question. She paused. She hadn't thought anyone had noticed. I'm not here to destroy you, Jameson said softly. But I want you to understand the impact of what you did. Because you didn't just disrespect a CEO. You disrespected every guest who might walk in here looking like me. Every young black man in a hoodie. Every woman wearing natural hair. Every person who doesn't look the part. You didn't just make a mistake. You set a standard, and it was the wrong one. Mr. Carter finally spoke. Mr. Blake, I take full responsibility. This is my staff. I'll make sure she's disciplined." Jameson cut him off. "No, this isn't about punishment. Not yet. It's about reflection." He turned to the receptionist again. "You have a choice. You can leave here today with a story about how your career ended because of one bad judgment. Or you can use this moment as a wake-up call. Learn, grow, and become someone who helps change this culture." Her eyes filled with tears, and she nodded silently. "I want to do better," she whispered. Jameson nodded. "Good. Then prove it." He stood up, shook Mr. Carter's hand, and added, "I'll be staying here tonight. As a guest. I'll be watching, not to catch mistakes, but to see who you all really are when no one's expecting it." The presidential suite was just as grand as Jameson remembered. Floor-to-ceiling windows, imported Italian marble countertops, and a panoramic view of Atlanta's shimmering skyline. But despite the elegance, his mood was somber. He stood silently by the window, hands in his pockets, staring out at the glowing city. Down below, people bustled through the streets, unaware of the moment that had just unfolded upstairs, a moment that, to Jameson, was all too familiar. He had faced this before, too many times. Disbelief, doubt, disrespect. Sometimes it was subtle, a glance, a question that wouldn't be asked of anyone else. Other times it was loud and undeniable, like tonight. But every time, it reminded him of something painful. Success doesn't always protect you from prejudice. He sat down at the suite's private dining table, where room service had delivered a perfectly arranged steak dinner with roasted vegetables, truffle mashed potatoes, and a glass of his favorite Malbec. But the food barely registered. His appetite was gone. Instead, he reached for a leather-bound journal, something he carried everywhere. He opened it to a blank page and wrote one word at the top in bold letters. Belonging. He stared at the word for a long moment before continuing. "Today, I walked into my own hotel and was told, politely and firmly, that I didn't belong. Not by a stranger on the street, not by a competitor, but by someone who works for me, who represents my name, who greets my guests." He paused, tapped the pen against the table, then added, "If this happens to me, a CEO, in a tailored suit, holding a reservation, what happens to the 22-year-old black kid in sneakers just trying to check in after a long trip? How many of them walk away, feeling invisible? How many give up?" A soft knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. He stood and opened it to find one of the hotel's bellhops, a young black man named Malik, maybe 21, holding a dessert tray with a nervous smile. "Evening, sir," Malik said. "Mr. Carter asked me to deliver this to you. Complimentary cheesecake and strawberries. Said it's your favorite." Jameson smiled faintly. "It is. Thank you, Malik. What's your name?" "Malik, sir. You've been working here long?" "Just 3 months, sir. First real job." Jameson nodded. "How's it going?" Malik looked down for a moment, hesitating. Then he said quietly, "It's all right. Some guests act weird around me. Like they're surprised I speak proper English, or like I shouldn't be touching their bags." Jameson's smile faded. "You ever think about quitting?" Jameson's smile faded. "You ever think about quitting?" "All the time," Malik admitted. "But I need this job, and I want to prove I can do it, even if they don't expect much." Jameson stepped back and motioned him into the suite. "Come in. I want to show you something." Malik entered cautiously and stood across from the journal, still open on the table. Jameson tapped the word he'd written at the top. "Belonging," he said. "That's what we need to fight for. Not just inclusion, not just representation. Real belonging, where no one has to question whether they deserve to be here." Malik nodded slowly, taking it in. Jameson leaned forward. "I want young men like you to stay in this industry. Not just as bellhops or servers, but as leaders, managers, directors, executives. But it starts with people like you believing you belong, and people like me making sure you're seen." Malik looked stunned. "Thank you, Mr. Blake. That means a lot coming from you." Jameson smiled. "You're welcome. But this isn't just words. Tomorrow morning, I want you to be at the staff meeting. I'll be announcing some changes, and I want you to hear them firsthand." Malik left the suite with a spark in his step, and for the first time that night, Jameson felt a flicker of hope. He returned to the journal, added one last line under his entry, and underlined it twice. "We rise when we lift others, but we lead when we teach them they were never beneath us to begin with. The next morning, the staff break room at the Goldstone Regency buzzed with uncertainty. Word had spread like wildfire. The CEO himself had spent the night in the presidential suite, and not under normal circumstances. Whispers traveled from the laundry rooms to the concierge desk. Did he really get mistaken for a trespasser? Is someone getting fired? Why is Malik here in a meeting with the execs? At exactly 9 a.m., Jameson Blake stepped into the room. He didn't bring a clipboard. He didn't walk in with lawyers or HR. He didn't need to. He brought presence. Wearing a charcoal gray blazer and no tie, Jameson looked directly at the gathered staff. Front desk attendants, housekeeping, kitchen workers, valet crew, and management. He nodded to the hotel manager, Mr. Carter, and then to Chloe, who stood quietly near the back. Her eyes met his just briefly before dropping. "Good morning," Jameson began. "Let me be clear, I didn't call this meeting to reprimand or embarrass anyone. But I want to talk about something very real and very urgent." He took a deep breath, then continued. "Last night, I came to this hotel without an announcement. Not as the CEO, not as a supervisor, just as a guest. The experience I had at this front desk was a wake-up call. Not for me, but for all of us." The room was dead silent. He turned slightly, walking slowly as he spoke. "We say we're a luxury brand, that we value excellence and world-class service. But if we only deliver that service to the people who look the part, then we're lying to our guests, to ourselves, and to our mission." Heads began to lower in realization. "This is not about blaming individuals," Jameson said firmly, his voice rising slightly. "It's about systems. It's about habits. It's about unconscious assumptions that turn into real consequences." He glanced at Malik, who stood toward the front, and smiled. "There are young, talented people right here in this room who don't feel fully seen, who don't feel heard. And if we can't treat each other with dignity behind the scenes, we'll never deliver authentic hospitality to the people we serve." Mr. Carter shifted uncomfortably. Chloe looked like she might cry again. But Jameson didn't let the moment fizzle. He leaned in, offering clarity with compassion. "So, here's what's happening starting today." He held up 3 fingers. "First, every employee, from concierge to housekeeping to upper management, will undergo quarterly anti-bias training, led by a third-party cultural competency team. This won't be a one-time seminar. It'll be ongoing, deep, personal." He held up 2 fingers. "Second, we're launching an internal mentorship program. Staff who want to grow into leadership roles, people like Malik, for example, will be paired with executives from our main office. Career growth won't depend on who fits a certain mold. It'll depend on talent, drive, and integrity." He paused, holding up 1 final finger. "And third, we are changing our guest service evaluation process. Secret shoppers will no longer just measure politeness and smile count. They'll also report on equity in treatment, whether guests from every background feel respected and welcomed." A wave of stunned expressions washed across the room. A few people nodded. Malik's eyes lit up with pride. Even Chloe, pale and quiet, looked genuinely moved. "I know some of this may feel uncomfortable," Jameson continued, "but change always is. Comfort doesn't create progress. Intentional action does." He stepped back toward the front and let the silence sink in. "I want this hotel and every Goldstone property to be a place where no one questions whether they belong. Not guests, not staff, no one." A few seconds passed. Then someone clapped. Then another. And then the entire room was applauding, not out of fear, not out of obligation, but out of respect. Something had shifted. You could feel it. As the meeting wrapped up, Jameson approached Chloe. She stood up straight, ready to face the music. "I just wanted to say thank you," she began nervously, "for not giving up on me. I've learned a lot already." Jameson nodded. "Learning is step 1. Now show me what you do with it." She smiled slightly. "Yes, sir, I will." Before he left, Jameson walked over to Malik and shook his hand. "You still want to be in this business?" he asked. Malik beamed. "More than ever." "Good," Jameson said, "because one day I want to come back and find you running a Goldstone of your own." Malik laughed wide-eyed. That's the plan. As Jameson stepped into his waiting car outside, the sun breaking through the skyline, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Not victory, not vindication. Change. And this time it was just beginning. Imagine walking into a luxury hotel you own and being told you don't belong there. That's exactly what happened to a successful black CEO who booked a night at his own five-star property, only to be met with suspicion, judgment, and a receptionist who made one unforgettable mistake.